Welcome to the Meditation Conversation, the podcast to support your spiritual revolution. I'm your host, Kara Goodwin, and I was so excited to sit down with Joy Giovanni in this episode after being a guest on her Spirit Speakeasy podcast. You're going to love this episode. We talk about angels and energy healing and mediumship, and she gives some fantastic tips for connecting with your loved ones on the other side and your spirit guides, which I'm personally really excited to implement. Joy is a renowned and sought-after psychic medium, healer, and spiritual teacher. She was raised in Boston and internationally known for her time as a WWE Diva, model, and actress. She always knew her sensitivity and connection with her own intuition and spirituality was something special, but it wasn't until she realized others didn't have the same sensing abilities, like seeing bright swirling colors every time she closed her eyes, that she channeled her psychic energy to help heal others. As a published author, public speaker, and media personality, Joy's calming nature matched with her unique gifts and insights go far beyond her individual clients, making psychic, mediumship, and healing more personable and accessible to audiences across the globe. So we're going to get into this great episode in just a moment. But first, for you plant lovers out there, are you familiar with Pure Leaf? Pure Leaf is an alternative and complementary approach to conventional plant care and pest control methods. It's a non-toxic, natural alternative for caring for your plants. There are compounds to give your plants more vitality, as well as address plant health issues. And as a plant lover myself, I personally love the indoor superfood and nutrient booster. Try Pure Leaf for yourself and use code KARAG20 for a whopping 20% off your order. And now, enjoy this episode. Well, welcome, Joy. I'm so excited to connect with you today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, I loved being on Spirit Speakeasy, and I've loved listening to the Spirit Speakeasy as well. And you have such amazing gifts that you're giving to the world through your mediumship and your psychic abilities. And let's just talk about how you got to where you are now, because you definitely didn't start in this, at least from your professional career, it didn't start with these skills.
Well, first, let me say the feeling's mutual, and I love meditation conversations, and I've been really enjoying your show. And thank you for sharing so much about meditation on Spirit Speakeasy. It's been really helpful and gotten great feedback on that episode. So thank you. So for me, it's interesting because looking back, I can see points in my life where the spiritual side of me or the spiritual gifts were very evident. But like most things in life, we don't really realize it until it's hindsight, right? And we're looking back and seeing like, oh, okay, like maybe other 3-year-olds don't see invisible ladies in chairs by windows in their house. But it was one of those things that like I just didn't really think about. So I'm going on with my life. I'm doing school. I become a mom at a young age. And then I had started practicing wellness. So I wanted to be a holistic health practitioner. My kids were little bitty, and it was, the things that we don't take kids to doctors for, tummy aches and things. And I was like, oh, I need to learn how to handle this. When I became a mom, I realized how little I knew about medicine and all of that. So I was like, I need to learn some of this. And then through that, I ended up having a career in fitness and fitness modeling and transitioned to acting and ended up on international stages as a WWE Diva, traveling all over the world. And my life was looking really perfect from the outside. I had, been building my career. I was already a SAG actor at that time. And what nobody knew was that I was really struggling. I felt small. I felt unhappy. I really wanted a career in regular film and television, but I was grateful for the job I had, and I was really pouring my heart and soul into it. Nobody knew that I had 2 small kids at home. I was supporting an extended family, and my marriage was falling apart. But on the outside, I was trying to keep it all together and be that version of me that everybody else needed and wanted me to be. And then one day it came all crashing down. I was suitcase by the door, ready to go out for my travels that week. The show aired live every week. And I got this call, and on the other end was this raspy, kind of wrestling professional voice saying, It's not personal, it's just business. We're cutting 50 people from our roster. You're the final cut. So everything came crashing down. My marriage disintegrated shortly after that, and I lost my house. So as a mom of two young kids, I was like, okay, what do I want to do? Well, when you're acting, when you lose a job, the next thing is like you're pounding the pavement doing auditions, and they don't care what time your kids get out of school. So I returned to wellness, to my roots, and I had a massage therapy practice. And I started really almost like breadcrumbs, finding these little bits of things that interested me. Meditation, personal development, kind of started to get interested in things like angels and oracle cards. And it was like bit by bit being breadcrumbed back to this most authentic version of myself. And I even had a business, an offshoot business, an ice cream truck when I first moved to San Diego. And I met my Reiki mentor, which is a Japanese form of energy healing, for those that don't know, uh, driving the ice cream truck. It was like so serendipitous that all these pieces just started kind of finding their way back to me. I mentored under her privately for a couple years. She was the first one that was like, "Oh, you're psychic. You have gifts." And I was like, "Oh, you're crazy," because I don't believe in that. That's not a thing. That's the movies. But I just like so many of us, whether it's meditation or intuition or any of that, we're confused about what it is and what it's not. And then during healing sessions with my clients in my practice, I started to become aware of um, their loved ones that had crossed over to the other side. And I could give a few details that they would say, like, "Oh my gosh, yes, that's my dad or that's my grandma." And I kind of thought, like, okay, hold on. Like, what is this? Do I want this? What do I do with this? Do I even have this? Like, to the degree that I need to. And then I sought out mentors, and I'm a big believer in there's definitely someone that knows more than me that I want to train under. So mentors and teachers, and it's been a journey from there. That was the first experience like that was probably 2011. So however many years that is, 13, 14 years ago. Now here we
Wow.
are.
I love it. So you talk about being 3 years old and just very naturally and organically seeing things that you assumed that other people had the ability to see as well.
Yeah.
And then it kind of coming back through Reiki as an example. So in that time in between, do you feel like you maybe turned it off, or did were they still showing up and you just were ignoring them, or how was that for you?
It's interesting because through my timeline of my life, there are points like when I was in grade school, I was in Catholic school, and we would have to go as part of our curriculum. We had to go to mass every week, that they do like a special one for the students in the week. And I was a little, maybe like 6, 7, 8-year-old kid sitting there. And when the priest was up at the pulpit, I could see colors moving around him. They were always men.
Mhm.
And I could, when people would sing and do like worship music, I could feel tingles move through my body. I could feel energy. I just think I didn't really consciously think, oh, are other people experiencing this or not? I always had, when I closed my eyes, my entire growing up, I had colors swirling inside my closed eyes. But it's one of those things where you don't really, for me anyway, it's almost like anything else where you just assume that that's just normal for everyone and the way it is. And so there were certainly points that I could identify certain things like that, but at the time I just didn't really even think of it at all. And even when I started my first, so when you do a holistic medicine school, when I did at that time and at that school, they made you learn massage therapy first. That's how I came to that. And you trade with students. So you work on other students. And I would physically feel a pain on myself, like in my shoulder. And then somehow I thought, like, oh, I don't have a pain in my shoulder. That must be for them. And I'd go to their shoulder and start working. They'd be like, oh my gosh, that's exactly where it's uncomfortable. So,
Wow.
but I just didn't really, I know it sounds crazy, but I just didn't really think, like, oh, this is something's happening here. I just thought, like, all right, well, this is how it is.
Yeah. Well, and then when you kind of got the taste for it and started to recognize, wait a minute, am I tuning into something on the other side of the veil? And you mentioned that then you sought teachers and mentors and
Yes.
so forth. So for you, there was that sort of foundational um, gift that you had already experienced in your own way growing up. But then, in order to get to the level that you're at now, where you have clients and people, like you kind of mentioned earlier, where you're like, is this even what I think it is? Is it
Yeah.
strong enough to be what it would need to be to kind of take me where I think I might want to go?
Hmm.
And clearly, you have been able to get to that through your training and your own natural gifts, but kind of honing those gifts. So, what has that been like for you to kind of the
Boy.
training piece to it?
It's been interesting. It's been a journey. There are lots of different styles of mediumship, which I didn't realize. So when I first started having these experiences, because of probably largely because of culture and religion, I had a lot of fear. So I had to really work through that piece of it and wanted to understand, like, is this even okay to be doing? And the way I used to say it is, I don't want to open doors I don't understand. So, of course, first I start looking to media, like, okay, what shows can I get my hands on? What can, and just really starting to understand, um, because spirit communication is a little bit different than anything else with the loved ones. It's different than guides, it's different than healing energy, it's its own thing. And I wanted to be able to communicate with them in a way that I could give kind of specific details. In the work, we call it evidence. The type of mediumship I practice is called evidential mediumship. um, there are other kinds where they, might be giving you information about spirit guides or might be talking about things that are not able to be validated. But when I'm working with someone's loved ones, I want them to share some specific details about their personality or their memories or that type of thing, which is its own training. And I thought, oh, okay, I'll be with this mentor. My mentor's name's Andy Bing. He's fantastic. He was in England when I was working with him. He's in Canada now. But I thought, okay, 1 year I'll kind of figure this out. Just like most trainings are kind of short. And I think I mentored with him for 4 years, maybe. Um, it's one of the most surprising things was that the work is not to make it louder, make it stronger, make it more. It's to be able to sense the subtlety of it. It never gets louder, stronger, brighter, bigger. The subtlety is still shocking to me sometimes, and so I think that's a lot of the evolution is learning how they might communicate, learning how to, I don't even want to say interpret, but understand, because it's largely through those subtle senses that they're communicating with me. It's through the emotions. It's through I might see a quick mental flash of a picture in my mind of a flower, for example. I just had this last night with a client, and I was communicating with her mom on the other side. And I knew that these rose bushes, these specific, this bush produced these beautiful red, velvety, very fragrant roses. And she was like, oh, yeah, there's only one bush that did that, though. That these are my mom's roses. And I said, oh, that one was her favorite. And the gardener just killed that one. So it's those kind of things that they'll bring through, but it's the practice and the development, which never ends, by the way. We're always developing, just like anything else. Is to be able to get more and more of those nuanced details to be able to more fully understand the communicator and what their need is, really. Does that make sense?
It really does, and I'm very fascinated to hear you say that as you went through your training, it's not that it amplified. It's more
Yeah.
that like you were able to tune into those subtle hints and like take them
Yeah.
further. Because I would assume that it's like, oh, you strengthen your ability to see or
Yes.
your ability to hear or
I
whatnot.
assumed that too.
Yeah,
It's true.
that's
Sadly, I'm
fascinating.
here to report
Yeah.
it's not true.
So it's
Uh,
almost like you just get better at, like, I mean, at interpreting and at,
Yeah. It's a discernment, just like you practice and teach with meditation. It's being able to discern the very, very subtle energy around you or subtle shifts. It's very similar to that.
yeah.
Um, so really, the other little bit that I think was really surprising to me and is surprising and maybe slightly disappointing to all of us is it's not like a light switch that, like, when someone says, like, I want to ignite my ability or I want to turn on my third eye. It's not a light switch, it's a relationship building, just like meditation, where you're building a relationship with that energy and how to manage your energy and all the elements of it, it's kind of similar to that, where it's building a relationship in our own energy to be able to kind of tune to their station or have that subtle sensing with them. So that was really surprising to me too, I guess.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. Now, again, you have this foundation that you were building on. Do you feel that this is something that anybody could learn, even if they don't feel that they have expressed any sort of gift in the past?
That's a great question. So I believe that we all have psychic ability, but what I understand it to be now is intuition. Psychic and intuitive, for me, those words are interchangeable. What I understand now is that psychic is not about predicting the future, which is why I thought when my first mentor told me I didn't have it, because in the movies, time stands still and there's this movie vision that plays out of the future. And I was like, that's definitely not happening. But what I've learned is with the psychic senses, it's about if you've ever had the feeling of, oh, that meeting had really good energy today. Like that felt really good. Or I know this person is saying to me, everything's fine, but I feel in the energy like something's off or something's not right. That's what psychic is. It's about more deeply understanding the emotions and what's happening now. Anyone can hone that. Um, the way my guides explained it to me a long time ago was it's kind of like playing baseball. Anyone could play in their backyard on the 4th of July or in the summer, but being professional level is a different level of commitment and a different level of building that not everybody wants to do. So, on the psychic side, I think we all have that as one of our natural additional gifts, our sixth senses. But with mediumship, it's a little different, similar but different. I feel like everybody has the ability to connect with their own loved ones, sense them, receive signs, know that they're there. Um, Something I'll say quickly about that is when we talk about it in the language is not quite perfect. So when you hear someone say, oh, you'll feel your loved one, people always tell me, well, I don't feel them. Well, it's because, again, they're expecting it to be like a physical, palpable touch or like, the room turns cold or it's so much more subtle than that. But everyone does have the ability to sense, communicate with, receive signs from their own loved ones. Communicating with other people's loved ones is just a different thing, kind of the same with the baseball analogy that some people want to pursue that and some people don't. The way it's said is even the best teacher can't make someone a medium that's not a medium. But I also believe that as we grow and do our personal development and our own emotional healing, gifts can rise to the surface at different points in our life. So I don't believe someone has to have known or, like me, had weird experiences as a kid. I think sometimes when we're ready for it, that gifts rise to the surface. So even if someone's feeling like I would have said, I don't have any gifts, there might be a time as we grow and heal and expand that new gifts or different expressions of ourself rise to the surface. And you'll love this. Actually, if there's a way to encourage it to the surface, it's meditation.
Mm, yeah, I would agree with that. So, when it comes to being able to connect with loved ones and receive clear signs, are there any tips that you have or starting points for people who don't have experience with that?
Yes. Okay. So I have a free 3-day mini course that I'll tell you guys about, and then I'll just share some tips. That's on the homepage of my website, joyfulmedium.com. It's right on that homepage. It's called Sign Magnet, and it's a 3-session mini course. They're short 15-minute lessons. It teaches how to get signs from the universe, like general signs. It teaches how to use numbers as signs, like if anyone sees like 1111, 444. It teaches how to use that as signs, and then it teaches in longer form how to get signs with your loved ones. It's great because then you can keep practicing and coming back to the videos if you need to. So that's available for anyone that wants it. It's totally free.
Oh, that sounds
Uh,
awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I love it a lot because it's for me. I give it a lot of times at the end of a group reading or a session because it's like, no, here, practice this. You can learn this. I find the quote unquote magic of it is picking a specific sign. So some people have something that reminds them of their loved ones. I'm thinking of a gal that I had in a group reading many years ago, and her dad kept showing me this blue jay, and I was like, I think your dad brings you blue jays, and she's like, oh, he used to play on the Blue Jays on the team, and I was like,
Oh.
oh, okay, so this is like a loaded symbol. So clearly, that's a very significant sign for her. But if you don't have something like that, maybe your grandpa didn't collect coins or there's nothing that you mentally relate, you can just pick something. And it doesn't have to be the same thing all the time. You can change it up. So, like if you're going on vacation and you want someone really, special to you to like show you different signs on this trip so that you know that they're there, you can just pick something. I like to you don't want to pick something that's like too obscure, but at the same time, I hesitate to say that because what they can do is pretty incredible. And some of the ways the signs come through are incredible. So picking something specific is a big key because a lot of people say, like, oh, I'm not getting a sign. And I'm like, oh, what did you ask for? And they're like, oh, I just asked for a sign. I don't know what it is. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And then it's like, well, they're doing it. It's just give them more to work with. So it can't, I mean, things in nature are great. But the other thing to hang on to is it's any way you receive that sign. So, say that you chose a butterfly. I have someone that sends me butterflies, and it's for this person, it's specifically the orange butterflies. And it's any way she can get it through to me. So, I've been at um, like a store that has china and dishes and seen an orange butterfly on a plate. So sometimes it's not the real butterfly. If you're at the mall and you see someone that has a tattoo of a butterfly, that counts. If there's a business that has a logo of a butterfly, that counts. So it's any way they can get it through to you. People don't realize they're doing so much work to bring us signs. Not only do they have to get us, like if it's on a billboard, for example, to cross paths with it, but they have to get us to look and recognize it at that exact moment, or they have to get that person to say that name to you, for example. So they're really working it out.
Yeah. Have you noticed in your own path that that has strengthened, like as you've connected more with your guides? Because, for example, with my meditation practice, it's like as I almost like pass through these levels, let's say, it the synchronicities, become stronger and more obvious and more and quicker and so forth. Have you had a similar experience?
I feel like with the synchronicities, yes. And when I'm more actively like in meditation, in this work, kind of building that relationship, right? It's more of a volley that I'm noticing. And certainly I'll notice, like if I do a meditation every day to sit with the spirit world. Sometimes someone will come and sit with me that I recognize that will join me, or I'll be kind of moving through my day and I'll feel one of my own loved ones like over my shoulder, so to speak. But the sign thing, this is one of the weird things about me is I started setting specific signs with loved ones when I was 6. I mean, I don't know how I knew to do that. I would ask kind of God or the universe for a sign about something and I'd get it. I'd ask for sign through music. I lost someone really significant in my life when I was probably about 5 or 6. And I've always, that's the orange butterfly person. I've always asked her to send me those and she always has. So I don't know why at 6 years old I was so bold to be like, this is the sign, send it. I mean, it was loving, obviously, but that's always been it's why I know it works because I've tried it for 40 years now and it
Yeah.
works. So that one just kind of came in from somewhere, who knows where.
I love that. Now, you've referenced a couple of times your guides, and I've heard you talk about this on the podcast too, of
Yeah.
it's like it seems as though you receive pretty clear guidance and explanations from your guides. And I also hear you saying that things are subtle, and so
Yeah.
it's talk about the balance between those, how those things show up for you.
It's a great question. So I believe I actually, at the time that this releases, I will have recently released an episode about who's on your spirit team because I believe we all have a team of guides and inspirers for different things in our life. So sometimes I'll sit in meditation and just the way I imagine it is opening my personal space bubble to kind of like love seat size and inviting a guide to sit next to me and just sharing that space with them. And sometimes it'll come in as almost like, um, call this person, check out this website that's been on your mind. So sometimes it'll come in like that. And sometimes it'll come in a little bit differently. Like if I have a question, for example, I might take that into meditation too. And it's not, I'm hesitating because I want to make sure I'm clear that it's not demanding of our guides or it's not sharp like that. There's an openness, a naturalness. And I also believe some things we might want to know, but we don't need to know. So I think that's a piece of it too. So I think anyone can start sitting with their guides. I mean, I think it does help to have a bit of a meditation practice just to be able to understand what it feels like just us in our bubble, just our own energy, and then inviting one in. But it does still come in very subtle. It's not like a disincarnate voice talking into my ear, even though sometimes I'm like, could you do that? It
Yeah.
just doesn't work that way.
That would be a lot
And
easier. Do you mind?
yeah, exactly. And sometimes it is through the synchronicities, like you said, where it's like almost energetic breadcrumbs ping ponging us one to the other to the other. And it's like, oh, okay, I'm starting to connect these dots. And we know it's not an idea or a solution that like I've personally come up with from my logical mind. It's more of like, for me, it's often a different perspective solution. And I'm like, oh, okay. But the other thing to know is that a lot of times for me, the guidance doesn't come in during the actual meditation time. That's the relationship building time. It usually comes in when I used to do massage. I used to launder and fold all my own sheets, and I would always come in when I was folding sheets. Now it's like if I'm like in the shower or doing dishes or on a walk is really powerful for me, moving my physical energy. And then it's just kind of, you're noticing the scenery, and all of a sudden, a block of thought will pop in that either answers something that's been on your heart or gives guidance or direction. I think I'm so glad you asked this question because I think one of the important things for people to know is that spirit guides are not here to um, tell us what to do. They will not usurp our free will. We're here to kind of bang around and feel uncomfortable and get outside of our comfort zone. And I think our human nature is to want to try to control and set things up in a way so that we can avoid discomfort. I'm the bearer of bad news on this because that's just never going to happen. And our guides won't uh, advise us in that way. Sometimes we have to be, I mean, most of the time we have to be out of our comfort zone for growth, but it's similar to that little plucking on our heartstrings when we're you know, in a space that we know is not serving us for our highest and greatest good. Where I see it strongly with people is like in a relationship that they know is not healthy for them or serving them anymore. It's kind of that subtle, soft, um, maybe you should go. Maybe it's time to go. How much longer are you gonna stay? It's not, again, not like a sharp wind or a sharp alarm or anything like that. It's very soft because we have to make the free will choice and action. They're not
Mhm.
gonna do that part.
Okay. So for you, the way that you experience your guides, if I understand correctly,
Yeah.
it's, the relationship building in the meditation. And then it's kind of allowing their guidance to come in naturally. And how do you recognize that? It like versus your own thoughts or ideas?
It's very subtle. And again, this is back to why it's so important to have a foundational meditation practice that we call it discernment. So, that discernment of, oh, this is my own anxious thoughts versus this is my intuition versus, oh, this is coming from somewhere else. That's such a subtle difference and shifting. And um, I wish I had like a better concrete answer of how I know the difference. For me, this is not going to make sense probably the way I'm going to say it, but it's kind of the direction it's coming from. I almost feel like something comes into my mind from the side. From the left is usually guides, from the right is usually spirit people, and from inside is usually intuition for me. I'm pretty directional though. I also I'm gonna give a little secret. I in meditation, when I'm trying to understand a guide or work with a new guide or request a new guide, I believe we can request a guide for like a project, for example. I imagine that I'm sitting like in the center of a circle or the center of a clock. And part of my relationship building, this is how I started when I very first started wanting to understand guides and angels. And my intention was to sort of very subtly sense or discern their energy coming from a specific direction. For me, because I told you I've always had color with me, sometimes I'll, in my understanding or just in my mind's eye or in my knowing, a certain color will pop into my mind. I used to have one that brought a very strong clairgustient smell too, that was other people could smell, not just me. So I'll kind of
Wow.
ask them to give quote unquote me some markers for them of like, oh, okay, this guide approaches from direct left. They come in pink. They feel like this, whereas this guide feels very strong, very masculine. Like my mediumship guide, for example, comes right behind my right shoulder, almost like a pole. Like, and he feels very solid, very grounded, very masculine. Um, so yeah, that's in a nutshell.
That you've
That's
given
how
a
I do it.
That's a lot of information in
I
terms of,
know.
but things that I haven't really thought about, like things that I can
Mm.
practically use in my own meditation
Oh,
because
good.
I I have not really tuned into like I mean, I guess I that's not fair to say. Like sometimes I will notice like, oh, this something has my attention like at 10 o'clock, for
Yeah.
example, or directionally.
Mhm.
But often I'm paying attention to my, what's going on behind closed eyes or
Yeah.
feelings. You talk about the people might be expecting a touch or whatever, but really those subtle feelings are happening
Mhm.
inside, and that's where we want to pay attention. So I'll have a lot of attention there in my inner world of like, am I feeling an opening? Where is my attention within my body? But not so much that directionality that you talk about. So I'm going to use that. I'm excited.
Good.
Thank you for
It's so
sharing
fun
that.
to play with too. And the other thing, people get really attached to like, what's my guide's name?
Mhm.
I believe, and I've kind of been shown like they don't necessarily, they're not attached to a name like that. I actually don't believe that that's how they necessarily understand each other on the other side. I feel like we each have a little bit of a different signature energy. Like I don't think because we don't have voice boxes over there, so I don't think we're yelling each other's name. I think we just recognize each other energetically. Because I have one, and I was like, "Oh, is your name this or this?" And they were like, just pick, just whatever you like." But sometimes you'll have an impression of a name or a sense of, and it's just some information gathering. So I think if we approach it instead of rigid, more like open hearted and curious. And the other thing is with building that discernment, it's also learning to trust ourselves that we can just accept that like, yeah, I feel a guide. Like
Mhm.
that's okay. Like instead of saying like, do I, am I making it up? That that was hard one for me though. It took me several years to get to that place. So I just want to encourage everyone, like, don't feel discouraged if you feel like you doubt yourself quite a bit. Just know that that's something to be working on. Just trusting yourself, and then you can set up a sign with your guide and ask for validation. If I'm understanding you correctly, can you get a yellow sticky note across my path in the next 48 hours? That
Mhm.
kind of a thing. So, yeah, we can ask for, but there's a fine line of asking for tangible validation and being continuously doubtful because it's like not relationship building, not trust building, if that makes sense. So I
Completely.
I sometimes will request those kind of things, but I'm also very careful to not, it's like just like anything, I guess, not becoming dependent on outside things and really working on trusting from the inside.
I love that. I mean, and that's comes up to the empowerment piece, right? Where it's like, it's part of the training, in my opinion, where it's like as you're kind of getting your legs about you to be like, how does this work? How do I know that it's working? How do I know it's not my imagination? We that kind of validation can be helpful. And then we need to mature and understand like you don't need to second guess every piece. You can feel it
Yeah.
within you. Is there an expansion, or what are your cues as you take
Yeah.
your steps forward that you can learn from?
Yeah, exactly. The other thing that's been really fun, that if someone is maybe a little more comfortable with their meditation practice already, that they can practice is, I didn't get to know a lot of my loved ones before they crossed over. So I was able to kind of sit in meditation, invite someone to sit next to me and just see what they shared or see what impressions I received, make some notes, and then I could go back. My dad's 85. He's on the younger side of 10 siblings, and I was able to go back with him several years ago and kind of check information. So that was really validating that, like, all right, something's happening here. I'm very lucky that he's very open-minded to all of this and
Yeah.
had an experience. Actually, it's funny when we were talking right before we started recording about Italy, and my family's from Italy. And when I told my dad, I had to kind of like come out of the broom closet to him, so to speak, and was like, this thing's happening. And I think I'm communicating with people that have crossed over. He was like, oh, yeah, when your grandma was a girl in Italy, she used to see people walking down with they called them mule girls, the girls on mules that used to take the whatever it was down from the mine. She would see deceased miners walking down beside. And I was like, oh, just nobody mentioned this. This is just, we just don't like, you guys knew this and just like, we just don't even. So, yeah, that was kind of fun. But if you are someone that has, um, I've even done it with, I used to live in this different place and it was on Kumeyaay land, indigenous land. And I was working kind of late one night and I started to subtly become aware of someone next to me. And I just sat in meditation with her and felt whatever impressions I got and was able to then Google and validate all these details about their indigenous family, what they did. There were some like really specific, strange things about them being very good at developing systems of irrigation, very advanced, and brush clearing, and all of that was right on the internet. So
Wow.
I do fun little play tests, or not, test is probably not the right word, but like open hearted. What can I like? It just feels playful to me. Um, so especially if you're in a place that's like historic of any kind or has like a long, new build maybe, but it's maybe not as much data to research. But yeah, it's kind of fun to start playing with and if you don't get anything, you don't get anything. Just don't be attached to the outcome. Just be there for the experience.
I love that. So I know that on your podcast recently, you have done a deep dive into angels, and
Yes.
angels came up a little bit earlier in our interview as well. What is your connection with the angels in terms of, do you see them as guides or do you see them as separate, and how do they show up for you?
That's a good question. So I kind of flash back to those days in Catholic school. Like I said, in Boston, we have some of the most beautiful Catholic churches with these really ornate, incredible stained glass windows and um, sculptures and statues and depictions of angels. So I think I had some sort of idea. For whatever reason, when I started to come into this work as an adult, they just felt very safe to me, probably because of that programming. So one of the first things I learned was to do angel therapy, which is essentially energy work. Um, and then I was following a practitioner that was really big into angels. So I was like, okay, this feels safe. This feels light. It was one of my breadcrumbs that I was picking up. For me, I believe we each have two guardian angels at least, sometimes more. I believe there's a group of archangels, which a lot of people have heard of some of them. That's the episode you're talking about. I've done since the beginning. We've been doing this series. I think we're on 5 or 6 of healing with the angelic realm, and we'll dive into one archangel at a time. And I do an experience at the end where you can kind of call them in. So those archangels are accessible to everybody. And then we have our own personal guardian angels. They feel a little different than guides to me. When I first started all this is when I started this directionality, where are you on my clock thing. And the angels, I kind of feel a little bit above and in the front. It's not that that's where they technically are in time space dimension, but it's just where I've kind of assigned. um, and I believe they're a little different than guides. I think sometimes guides have incarnated into our earth school. Angels, I don't think have. I understand them as having just this incredible love for humanity, unconditional. There's something very, I think light is the best word I have for them. There's something very light and airy and loving and kind about them. I think we all can work with them as well. But I also think it's okay if someone feels not interested. I think there are things that will draw our attention and things that won't. The other thing to know is you don't have to believe in any specific belief system or tradition to work with that energy. Some people like to think them as just very high vibrational light beings. That's okay too. They don't mind.
I love it. And this may go in an odd direction, but like
Okay.
in my own multidimensional experiences that
Yeah.
I've had, I I don't necessarily connect like knowingly with the angels very often. I mean, I invite them into my meditations and so forth, but my experiences where I'm like where I feel it's more of a two-way thing, have been limited. But when I have really felt like, oh, these are angels, this is the angelic realm. It is as I because a lot of times I will try to pay attention to where I'm active in my brain. So
Mm.
I might be having an inner experience, but you can always bring your attention to like, where is my attention in my brain? Like, what is active in my brain? And it's always very high, up high in the brain, like close to the crown.
Oh, interesting. I love it.
And that makes me like, when you said you see them like the clock, the clock
Yeah,
is
they're kind of up
around you, but
here.
you see them like above.
Yeah.
That makes complete sense in terms of just my experience, and then kind of like, you love the evidential stuff, and that's very similar with me of like, well, what mechanically is happening? Like,
Yeah.
where is my awareness now? And it's interesting too that that's close to the crown,
Yeah.
where and it just gets like whiter and whiter, and gold, but just like a really bright light the higher and more focused it is up there.
Yeah.
So it's
It's
interesting.
so interesting too that you're talking about white in the crown. So before the deceased loved ones started coming to me, or before I knew that they were there, I trained, well, in part into that time, but I had already started training in a trance mediumship development program, which is essentially raising the crown to very high vibrational levels of white to then either channel, kind of I can move to the side in meditation in a deep state and channel that way, or a little bit less so for healing. So I love that you're aware of those upper, gold and white layers up there.
Oh, I haven't heard about that, so that's really
Yeah.
cool.
That's what I mean. Like so many breadcrumbs. And I'm a Gemini
Yes.
moon. So I feel like I need
Oh,
I
Gemini
need to be.
moon.
Yes.
Okay.
So that is I've dabbled in so many things, but
Yeah.
sometimes it's a reason, sometimes a season, and some of them have stayed with me forever. And sometimes things loop back around.
Yeah. I love that. Wonderful. Well, this has just been so fulfilling. Can you please tell people how they can connect with you and find out more about you?
So the podcast is Spirit Speakeasy. It is on all platforms where you would normally find podcasts. You can just search Spirit Speakeasy. If you prefer a video version, I put those on my website, joyfulmedium.com, in the blog section. You will also find the weekly readings there. I do a usually 6 to 8 minute, sometimes 9 minute weekly reading, just taking a look at the energies, potentials for that week. So if you're into that, those are also in the blog section of the website. And you'll find them on socials, at Joyful Medium, all the places: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Um, what else? The website's joyfulmedium.com. That's probably the best way to find out what event is this month, what's going on, what are the happenings. That's where the free mini course is, right on that homepage. And you can learn more about me. I also do every month a free monthly community offering. This year, we've been bouncing back and forth a little bit between healing, and sometimes I'll throw in a mediumship group reading. For the rest of 2024, I have them scheduled out as healings, though. So everyone's live on Zoom, and I, for about an hour, do guided meditation and do Reiki healing, energy healing. Sometimes healers I've trained called side chair, will sit and heal alongside me. So those are really wonderful, just to get some Reiki and resetting in our auric field and in our chakras. Yeah, so those are all the ways.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your beautiful light. Thank you for everything
Thanks
that
for
you're
having
doing
me.
out in the world to help elevate the vibration. And it's been such a
Well,
joy.
thanks. Yeah, it's been wonderful talking with you, and I am hoping we can collaborate again in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to this episode of Meditation Conversation. I'd be so grateful if you would share this episode with someone in your life who would appreciate it. You may not realize just how valuable your sharing is, as it helps to build momentum and make high vibrational content such as this more accessible and easier to find. I'd also be so grateful for you to subscribe to this content. Thank you for your support, and I look forward to the next meditation conversation.